David, I want to pick up on what you were talking about in terms of fiscal policy sort of picking winners and losers, whereas monetary policy has given us a floor in the economy here. What do you see the economy looking like coming out of this? Because certainly there are parts of the economy that have been decimated by this pandemic, and I'm talking things like hospitality and leisure. In other words, what are the changes that you think will be more permanent and what will be more temporary? And how is that then feeding into your investment strategy?
That's a really tricky one. I sort of struggle with that question a lot. I think there will be a lot of return to normalcy. I think the travel industry and the hospitality industry will come back, and people want to go out. People want to go to movies. They want to travel. They want to live in cities, and they want to experience socializing like they did before. But I think there's also a sort of longer term. Maybe this is the hysteresis effect that Julia, the other Julia, was talking about, that we should think about, is maybe there's something long lasting in all of our psyches that this can happen again. And, if you're a young family with young kids and you were raising them in a lovely loft in downtown Chicago or Tribeca or wherever, and you had to go through this last year without a place to get away from, or maybe you had to move in with a parent or a sibling or something and displace everything, I think it's going to change the way people raise a family and think about where they raise a family. And so suburban life for me, I think, comes back to some extent, and city life becomes more complicated for people to take that plunge and say, like, I have a 5 to 10 year plan of raising my family in a big city, which is, I'm an old man now. I'm going to be 54 soon, but we didn't do that in my age group as much. We all kind of moved out to the suburbs. It was more the modern era of you guys here that were doing that, and maybe that's just not going to happen as much. So I think that's one big structural change, is people are going to look for a place where they maybe can escape these things if they happen again. Because it is very off-putting. But this is not the end of leisure. This is not the end of flying. This is, maybe people act a little bit more locally and want to go out a little more locally and do things more locally. But, everybody's going to want to go see the Trevi Fountain in Rome, and everybody's going to want to go on a holiday to sort of the Caribbean. I don't see that stopping, and I think the cruises will come back. But I think how you live and where you call your home may change a little bit, and having your home based in an apartment complex where they could kind of force you into a little tiny box in a city where, maybe you don't always agree with how they're running everything is a really dangerous way to make a lifestyle choice. So I think we're going to have some big lifestyle choices for the millennials and the Gen Zers coming up, but we'll see. Maybe I'm just being an old guy that's lost his way a little bit.
David, I think is feeling that personally. David, if I could just interject, go ahead.
No, David, I was going to ask you. I think you touched upon this briefly early on in your comments. Do you think it would just be better for the economic recovery if we don't get a new stimulus plan?
I don't know that I go that far. I just don't know that the multiplier is that high. I'm not a negative multiplier guy so much. There are some out there that think, when the government steps in, they just completely crowd out the private sector and they even make it worse. I'm not sure I'm ready to go down that aggressive a rabbit hole, but I just don't think the multipliers are that high. I think you spend a lot of money, you raise some debt, and you have a pretty small multiplier on what you're getting back on that, particularly when it comes to spending. Now, spending where you're building public sector projects, if you will. I think more transfer payments in a time of a crisis are a completely different story. So what we did with unemployment insurance benefits, everybody hates that story of we gave everybody an extra $600 a month. But honestly, those were the people that were at most risk. Those were the people that felt like they might have had to go to work and put their families at risk. And I think we did an amazing job in a public health setting in calming that down and getting that income to people. But again, I think, we've been able to create jobs. We've created over 12 million jobs. If you want to get a job, you can pick up and move and get a job. You might not be able to stay in the same city you were in. You might not be able to stay in the same industry you were in, but there are jobs out there, and they're coming back, and they're coming back fast. So in the beginning, I think it was very important when we were all stuck But I think as time goes on, it becomes less important.
And, David, just to wrap up, I want to kind of go back to the framework you were outlining at the end of the last segment of, we're looking at dollar up, rates up, stocks up, which is different than what prevailed in the wake of the last crisis. And I've had a lot of conversations with folks on this program about how did investors learn the lesson from '09 of when the market starts ripping, you just kind of hold your nose and buy, and that's the way things go. Do you think that maybe investors haven't yet understood how the next decade of growth and profits and stock performance may differ from what we saw during the 2010s when, again, that was rates low forever for the first time, and a lot of people learning things, in a new way in the wake of the last crisis?
I mean, I don't know. I think it's the same story. There's always going to be haters. There's always going to be people that say the Fed's just going to create inflation, that monetary policy doesn't solve anything, that, this is all just something we have to pay back in the future. I hear it all the time. I heard it in 2010, 11, 12. The Fed can't do anything. We're going to have to pay the piper, and it's all going to have to go into a terrible place. And the reality was the Fed did do a good job, and they did get us back on track, and they should have done it even a little faster than many of those folks who were, buying gold in 2010 and 11 would have had you done. So I think that's the story. The story is that there's just going to be people who don't believe that Fed incentivization of the private sector through low risk-free real rates, they don't believe it works. And they don't trust the Fed to pull that accommodation away before it can generate some inflationary consequences. I think they've done a pretty good job over the last 30 years of controlling the inflation problems that might come from easy monetary policy. If anything, they've got a deflation or disinflation problem, and they need to fix that. And thankfully, they've announced in the last two meetings ago, that they are going to fix that. And that's an important thing for the market. So I don't think it's new. I think you're always going to have this cohort, and they always, get excited about, hiding in a cave with a gun and a case of scotch, and now they can have some Bitcoin and some gold, and maybe they're right on Bitcoin because that's a different animal entirely. But usually the economy, well, always that I've witnessed, at least in the U.S., we recover, the business cycles, we go up, we come back. I'm not going to sell short the American economy going through another business cycle upswing. I'll never do it. So in that sense, I just can't be the hater. And we used to make hats that had no haters on them, big circle and line through it. I think both of the Julie and Julia know those. And I think I can even remember writing a piece back in 11 or something, stocks are for lovers and gold is for haters. We were sort of beating up on them pretty hard. So, we'll see. Let's see how gold performs now. I mean, it's a little bit of a different animal than it used to be, but I don't think this is, Miles, I don't think it's new. I really don't. I think it's the same story.